What's up, everybody? This is Trey Biddy with HawgSports.com, HAWGsports.com. 6 Saturdays, and we've got Arkansas football. We're going to talk about that, what's coming up on the horizon with fall camp starting. We're going to talk to Danny West to talk about this big recruiting weekend, the Hogwild Hangout, and we're going to get to your questions and more, all that and more, on today's episode of Hog Sports Live. Hey, before I get started, I want to remind you there's plenty of ways to watch and listen. You can always tune in on Facebook Live. Be sure to follow the page if you haven't done so already. We put all of our free content, not our VIP stuff, on the Facebook page so you can read that. And also available on YouTube. Be sure to throw us a like or a thumbs up on both of those platforms. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and hit the notifications bell so you're alerted anytime we upload new videos. Take a moment and give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts if you haven't done so. And we're also available wherever else you can think of to find your favorite podcast, Spotify, Google Podcast, everywhere else. Okay. I'm going to bury the lead a little bit because I'm going to get to a little bit of basketball stuff first. Curtis Wilkerson reported Kenyon Minifield is going to redshirt as a non-scholarship player next season, so he won't be participating. And he'll be practicing, but he won't be playing. So that does actually leave one scholarship open. So something to follow there with basketball. Curtis is taking a little time off and going to be back with us here in time for fall camp to start. So scholarship distribution, again, that gives you 5 returners: Devontae Davis, Trevon Brazile, Joseph Pinion, Jalen Graham, Mekhi Mitchell, 2 incoming freshmen, Layden Blocker and Bay Fall. 5 transfer additions: Tremont Mark, L. Ellis, Caleb Battle, Jeremiah Davenport, Chandler Lawson, and 1 non-scholarship redshirt, Kenyon Minifield. 2 walk-ons, Lawson Blake and Cade Arbogast. So that's where the basketball roster is real quick. I know I didn't say I was going to talk anything about basketball, but there's still a little bit. Andrew Ellis, who's going to join in doing some more basketball coverage for us, has his projected starting 5. Let me know if you agree with this in the comments. Mekhi Mitchell at forward, Trevon Brazile at forward, Tremont Mark at guard, Devo Davis at guard, and L. Ellis at guard. The only disagreement I have is somewhere in there, I think Caleb Battle. I think Caleb Battle is going to be in there in some capacity. None of the guys in there, Devo obviously stepped it up as a 3-point ace last year, but it's just a guy who can drop a dagger in your heart. Caleb Battle, he has such range. I just feel like there's a spot for him in the starting 5 somewhere. So just want to get to a little bit of basketball stuff. One more thing. 24/7 Sports came out with college basketball's most potent guard big duos. They had 3 tiers and a pretty elite list, and Devo Davis and Trevon Brazile made this list also. So that's notable to mention. All right, we're going to get to Danny West now. Arkansas has the Hogwild Hangout. Everybody has their idea. LSU has a pool party. Arkansas used to have the Woo Picnic. None of the names are really that good. This one's fine, Hogwild Hangout, but, none of the names are great in my opinion. For those of you who don't follow Danny, you can follow him at Danny West 24/7. He's the HawgSports recruiting analyst and does a fantastic job. Most of his content is VIP, which, by the way, today only is 50% off. That ends, today is the 25th, July 25th, 2023, and that ends at 11 o'clock tonight. So if you want to sign up at HawgSports, it's 50% off, no promo code or anything like that. Danny, how you doing, brother?
Doing great, man. How are you?
I'm doing good.
Long time no talk.
It's been a little bit since we had the show. I went to Fort Collins, obviously, and for vacation. Then right after that, headed out to Nashville for SEC Media Days. I did do a walk and talk, but that's a solo deal with just me and whoever's watching. But, yeah, it's good to have you on, and things are gearing up again. It's been a little bit of a lull in recruiting stuff. We had, kind of a lot of visitors come in, then kind of a flurry of commitments, and now looking ahead to this Hogwild Hangout visit list.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about it, to be honest. Kind of the last hurrah before fall camp. I think coaches around the country have kind of trended toward this. We saw it started with Coach Morris a few years ago. I want to say 2018, 2019.
The Woo Picnic.
Yeah, I forgot the nickname there, but yep, you're right. I think it's a good idea, man. Anytime you can especially if you got the last official in June for some of these guys, if you can get them back a month later and kind of be the last face they see before they get back to school, I think that's really key. And some of those guys, I'm sure, will be in attendance this weekend. Shaping up to be a pretty good list. I've been kind of surprised by the 2025 list so far. They've got some really good players coming in. Now, you would expect most of your committed guys to be on hand. I mean, when you talk about a guy like Jaden Baugh from Decatur, Georgia, that's a pretty long trip for a picnic. Maybe you kind of ease up on some of those guys. Zuri Madison from Lexington. I'm not sure some of those guys are going to be able to make it, but the majority of your 24 commitments will be there. And then, of course, as I mentioned, 2025, you got Lance Jackson, younger brother of Landon Jackson, SEC Media Day star. And Lance is fired up. He's been here so many times, as you would expect, being the brother of a player. But I like where they're sitting with him. Big-time defensive lineman, 4-star out of Texarkana, Pleasant Grove on the Texas side there, 6'5", 245, kind of a headliner for this weekend. Another 4-star, Devin Harper for next year's class, 2025 out of Shreveport, Captain Shreve High School. He's 6'5", 300, got offers from pretty much everybody, including LSU, so that's going to be a tough one. Alabama, Georgia, a lot of schools there for Devin Harper. We could go on down through the list here. You got a 4-star linebacker out of Florida. Are we saying Kissimmee, Florida? Is that how you say that?
Kissimmee? I always thought it was Kissimmee.
Hey, that's a little forward of
it
you.
Could be. I think you set me up for that one.
Yeah,
I think you're right though. I think it's Kissimmee.
Kissimmee, Florida. Osceola High School. Anyway, Elijah Melendez, 6'1", 223, composite 4-star. We've got him as a 3-star on 24/7 Sports. Alabama, Arkansas, the list goes on and on. He's got Auburn, big-time player there. So that's another 2025 kid. And then, of course, got to mention the in-state, relatively fairly recent offer, and Marcus Wimberly came to camp out of Bauxite. Defensive back is what I'm calling Marcus. 6'1", 180. I think you may have too, Trey, already put in a crystal ball for Marcus just based on his initial comments coming out of that offer last month. So 6 foot 180 out of Bauxite, minor there. So Michigan has joined his list. Really good player. It seems to be shaping up for Marcus. So those are just a few of the underclassmen we'll be watching. You've got Colton Yarborough as well. Out of Durant, Oklahoma. He's a 6'4", 210 edge rusher. Got a really good offer list as well. So some of these 25s and 26s really stand out, and, of course, it's always good to get the committed guys back on campus. Could be a couple of guys who sneak in there who are, we'll say, undecided, maybe even committed to other schools, but still kind of pumping the brakes on that, checking to make sure we can get a green light on some names.
It doesn't look, Danny, like there's any, aside from maybe Jeremy Cook out of Hoover, it doesn't look like there's any 2024 uncommitted guys. Looks like it's all kind of looking ahead to 2025, even 2026.
I'm glad you brought up Jeremy. I skipped right over him there on my list, but yeah, he's definitely notable. I've actually put in a crystal ball for him, kind of snuck one in there yesterday, just based on some intel we picked up last week. We put it on the Razor's Edge that Jeremy could be one to watch. I think that's especially the case after you miss out on Ashton Hampton, big-time safety out of Florida who recently committed to Clemson. So got to pick up probably one more safety. And, this is a guy, 6'3", 190. When I talked to him 2 months ago, he's 175, so and about 6'2" at the time. So still growing. He's actually made the switch from wide receiver. He played primarily offense last year, now making the switch to safety most of the time this year. So Arkansas seems to like him quite a bit on defense. They checked him out in the spring evaluation period. And I think he's going to be one to watch, man. It wouldn't shock me at all if he's part of this class. I remember talking to him, and he was just super fired up. I understand people look at him and say, he hasn't been rated. He's at Hoover, Alabama, not a ton of offers. He does have Cincinnati. That's a pretty notable offer, I would say, nowadays. Southern Miss is on there, but I think a lot of it, Trey, just is probably because he is making the switch. Most of his film is offensive, and and maybe coaches want to get a better look at him on defense. So Arkansas was in there early for the spring eval period, and evidently they like what they see. So keep an eye on Jeremy Cook. Wouldn't surprise me if that one starts to unfold rather quickly.
Danny West joining us again. You can follow him at Danny West 24/7 on Twitter. Does a great job for us. Danny, Sam Pittman said at SEC Media Days that their goal is always to sign 25 high school recruits. I'd kind of changed how I thought things would work out, and for Arkansas, I was thinking more like 20 high school recruits, 10 transfer portal additions. So who's right, Sam or me? How do you think things are going to play out in the future with the balance?
Probably both of you. If I had
somewhere
to guess,
in between.
Yeah, ideally, he's probably right. Yeah, of course you would like to sign 25 if they're the right 25. I think that's kind of been the problem over the last couple of years. You see 22, 21, 23, whatever the case may be, not quite 25. And a lot of that is, do you take a flyer on a guy nowadays when you know you can use that scholarship and go get somebody who's already developed a little bit and kind of know what you're getting? So I think that's probably what they're running into. And look, man, they could probably help themselves in the rankings a little bit by taking 2 or 3 more guys a class. But is that really what you want? Are you trying to win the recruiting rankings, or are you trying to get better immediately? And, of course, you want to do both, of course. But, it's not always possible for Arkansas. They do come up second for a lot of these big-time guys that they're in on. And as we've talked about here on the show before, I'm not so sure that's a bad thing in this climate. I mean, you never know 6-8 months from now where these kids might end up. So, that would be my answer for you. I think you're probably right, too. Of course, you would save some of those schollies if you can.
Well, Danny, right now Arkansas's lagging a little bit in recruiting. Now the quality level's high. I've talked before about 9 4-star recruits in this class in 24/7 Sports ranking history back to 2010. Arkansas has never had more than 9 4-star recruits in a class, and that was in a 23-man class. There's just 16 in this class right now. The only schools ranked ahead of Arkansas right now that have fewer commits are Oklahoma and Alabama. Let me see if Alabama's still there. Oklahoma has 1 fewer commit, and Alabama has 1 fewer commit also, and Arkansas is at 16. So, I mean, from a pace standpoint, it doesn't seem like they're tracking to get 25 guys in here in this class.
Yeah, especially when you look at the big red boards, which I just updated the offensive. Not a ton of new news in that. I think people often get confused, like I'm trying to sell them on all this breaking news. A lot of times it's updating heights, weights, visit status, whatever the case may be. So not a ton of new news. I'm still looking for maybe some new offensive line targets. Of course, we're still talking about Jaquan McCroy. I'm not ready to call it yet, man. I see so many trends with Oregon being so far away, and they've got such a history of losing big-time guys. We've talked about it at length here on the show, but that's a long way from home for a lot of dudes, especially from Pinson, Alabama. So I'm not saying Arkansas is going to swing him and get him, back on board or on board initially. But I'm not ready to call it yet, man. That's just a long way from home. So in order to stay in the top 20, I think you're going to have to come away with a guy like that. You got to knock it out of the park with these linebackers. I would say you kind of have to flip a guy like Xavier Atkins out of Texas. Need to keep the home state kid at home, Wyatt Simmons. He's been really, really tough for us to get anything out of, and, that's their call to make. But I think Arkansas, based on everything I've heard on Arkansas's end, feels like they're in a pretty good spot with him. So if you can knock out those two, potentially swing McCroy there at the end, man, I think they've got a realistic shot to stay in the top 20. But you start looking around at who's behind you so far. I mean, Texas, you're barely ahead of Texas right now, and they really haven't made their push yet. South Carolina's got a lot of momentum, only 13 commitments right now. Ole Miss always seems to close strong, and then you look down at Auburn, down at 14th in the SEC, only 11 commitments so far. So it's really, really tough. But, just based on the last few years, I would say this might be their most realistic shot if they can do those things that we just talked about to stay in the top 20. And, is there a huge difference between 15 and 20? Going back to what we talked about a minute ago, some of those teams only took those 2 and 3 extra players, maybe 3 stars, and that's why they're ahead of you. So I think if you just get in the top 20, you've done a really, really good job, and you've given yourself a chance.
Yeah, I think so too, Danny. But also to your point, you named 3 players there, and I'll add Jeremy Cook into the mix too for an ideal finish there, and that's 4 guys. So I feel like I'm right, and Sam was wrong on the number.
Let him know, Trey.
Hey, Danny, with Wyatt Simmons, what's the status there? I mean, this is a guy that's if I could compare his recruitment to anybody, it's not similar in one way to Traylon Burks, because Traylon Burks, we knew who he was like in 9th grade, and Wyatt Simmons just kind of exploded onto the scenes. But in terms of like social media and, knowing what's really going on and everything, I mean, Wyatt Simmons is very similar in that regard, don't you think?
Yeah, and hey, more power to him, man. It's his right to go about it this way, and I actually kind of like it. You know? I've tried him a couple of times, and he's been very respectful and just, declining comment. And head coach's son, they've been through it a little bit. I'm sure he's been well versed in how to do all of that and would have no trouble doing it. He wants to keep everything private, and I'm all for that. So in terms of his recruitment, it seems like Clemson felt really good about him there for a little bit, based on what I was hearing. At one time, and I haven't checked recently, he was one of only 4 linebackers offered by Clemson in this year's class. Don't you think that's a pretty good compliment for a kid?
Absolutely.
That make you feel pretty good. And Clemson's kind of known for that, being very, very selective because they can afford to be. So I think they're tough competition. Auburn seems to have some connections there, and hey, they felt good about it too. And like I said, Arkansas has felt good about it. So I wish I could tell you more. I just don't know, man. It's a lot going on, but I can only go based on what Arkansas is feeling right now, and it seems like they feel like they're in a pretty good spot with Wyatt coming off of his official there in late June. Of course, you got the last one. He did go to Auburn June 1st and then Clemson 2 days later. And then, of course, he went to church camp for a few weeks and then came back and went to Arkansas for an official. And coming out of that, it sounded pretty good for the Hogs, but I'm not ready to make the crystal ball prediction if that tells you anything.
Gotcha. Danny, anything else you want to add before we cut you loose?
Oh, man, I could talk to you forever, but it seems like we're about 3 weeks behind on all this. But planning on doing a podcast for HawgSports members here in the coming days, probably after the cookout, and just kind of go down and kind of recap the summer a little bit. So be on the lookout for that, and we'll get into certain things, with a little more detail coming up here pretty soon.
All right. Well, we'll look forward to that. And, of course, happy birthday. Danny West celebrated a birthday on Sunday. He told me for the first time in 18 years I didn't text him happy birthday. I missed him by a couple of days.
Streaks are meant to be broken, but I'll turn it on you. I'll wish my baby girl happy birthday. Hers came, she was born 3 years ago, the day before my birthday, so it's kind of, my birthdays are irrelevant nowadays, man. Nobody cares about it. It's right. Mason's birthday. We're like 3 days later, she's still celebrating her birthday. So
when you get our age, you start celebrating like every 5th birthday.
That's right.
Like 40, 45, such. All right, brother. Appreciate you appreciate you coming on. All right, everybody. That's Danny West again. You can follow Danny at Danny West 24/7 on Twitter. Does a great job with us at HawgSports.com again. HawgSports is 50% off right now. Most of that stuff you read is just kind of a sneak peek into some of the insight that Danny West provides. And again, 50% off right now. It's like just over $6 a month, which is what it breaks down to at HawgSports. So looking back at the SEC football media poll, all SEC teams, order of finish, this is something that the media never gets right. I can't ever remember them getting right, especially, maybe they predicted the first two teams, but last year they didn't. Last year they had Alabama and Georgia. Alabama predicted to win it all. It was actually Georgia and LSU. LSU did not get a single first-place vote. I've shared with you guys before that I did things a little bit differently than everybody else. I was one of 14 people to predict Tennessee to win the Eastern Division. Even though I really like Georgia, I just think, you know how I think. You guys have been with me long enough to know that sometimes I think that, what are the odds Georgia wins a third straight national championship? Because it takes a little bit of luck along the way also. New quarterback. I like new quarterbacks. And I went with LSU. I was one of 117 people, so a lot more popular opinion to pick LSU over Alabama. And I've got LSU winning the whole thing also, which I don't think is that far-fetched for a team that made it to the title game last year, has a returning starting quarterback. I think I had 6 players on my preseason All-SEC team, and the combined vote finished with 4 players from Arkansas. So I had 6. They had 4. Brady Latham was left off, which I had Brady Latham. Cam Little was the other one, I think. I think that might be it. Maybe Landon Jackson. Did I do 6 or 7? 7 might be a little homery. But anyway, the All-SEC list and predicted order of finish is out. Alabama with 165 votes in the West, Georgia with 265 in the East, and Georgia with 181 overall. Alabama 62 for the overall, LSU with 31 overall, and Tennessee with 5. Arkansas, by the way, with 2 and for the overall, 3 to win the Western Division, and some jackasses gave Vanderbilt 8 votes. So if you're one of the people that put 8 votes in for Vanderbilt to win the Eastern Division, you are a jackass. Okay. How do you guys think Arkansas is going to finish? It's time to start thinking about predictions. Again, we're 6 Saturdays away from that Western Carolina game in Little Rock. And by the way, I was looking at my Bet Saracen app and noticed that Arkansas is 34.5-point favorites over Western Carolina, a team that they've never played before. Again, it's in Little Rock. It's the opener. It's a 3 o'clock game in Little Rock, Western Carolina at Arkansas, and you can check that out on the Bet Saracen app. 34.5. Arkansas's favored. Do you like that? Do you like those odds? You like Arkansas to put 5 touchdowns on somebody, a separation of 5 touchdowns on somebody to open things up? I mean, you got a lot of offensive firepower with KJ Jefferson, Rocket Sanders coming back, a new cast of wide receivers, obviously. You wouldn't think that the offensive line, even if it comes to a point where the offensive line is a problem for Arkansas moving down the road, it's not going to be against Western Carolina. They're going to dominate Western Carolina up front most likely. So what do you think? Defense is going to be good enough? 131 ranked pass defense in the country last year. Are they going to be much improved? I think they're going to be improved. Are they going to be good? That still remains to be seen. But improved, yes, I think so. It's a hard deal to predict. Beyond the Western Carolinas out there and Florida Internationals and whatnot, beyond those teams, when you're talking about matching up against SEC teams, it's hard to predict things nowadays. I've said this before, but like if you take this Arkansas defense, the depth that they have that's going to allow them, knock on wood, to make it through an entire season with quality players all the way through, not just like you get somebody injured and just like whole damn season's down the drain. It's not going to be like that because they have put together depth through the transfer portal. We talked about 9 seniors on the defensive line. We talked about a legitimate 3 deep on the defensive line of players who have experience, who you feel good about, veteran, older players. Linebacker has shored up a lot. When you talk about Manny Powell and Jordan Crook being your 5th and 6th linebackers potentially, that's pretty damn solid. Secondary could be a weakness, but still, they have done a lot of work bringing in really quality players, changed things up with the staff. But the problem is, again, you compare this defense and you take this defense and you put them back 5 years ago, it's going to be a stout defense in this league. Okay, maybe you still have problems against the upper echelon elite, Alabama, Georgia, but it's going to be a stout defense now. But you take this defense and put it now in the SEC. Ole Miss has done the same thing. They're out there recruiting at a high level in the transfer portal. Missouri, they're bringing in guys from the transfer portal. Everybody is. Everybody in the conference has been able to provide immediate depth for their defense instead of having a true freshman defensive end coming in and playing a big role. Quincy Rhodes is probably not going to play that much next year. It's changed things for freshmen. Now Luke Hasz is going to play, but he enrolled early. But for the most part, you're not going to see like half your freshman class come in and make a significant contribution like you used to see. It's just not going to be that way anymore. So it's really hard to gauge how good this program can be. What we do know about the offense is it's great to have a returning starter, multi-year starter at quarterback. Great to have some stability in the backfield at running back also. But, when you start looking at, the defense, yeah, it looks good on paper, but again, everybody else is doing this. So it's hard to predict. I've said before, I think 4-4 is not unrealistic at all for this team. In fact, I think it might be a floor. 8-4 overall, regular season, chance to win 9. I've said this before too. You look at that 4-game stretch in the middle of the season. You come out of there 1-3. That's not ideal for anybody. I mean, people would be raising hell if they come out of there 1-3. Even if you predicted 8-4 or something like that at the beginning of the season, when you're riding through the season game by game and they lose, it's incompetence. They're not trying hard. All of these kind of things. It's the emotional roller coaster you ride throughout the football season. Even though you said they're going to lose 4 games, when it comes to the game and they lose it, rage. You know what I'm talking about. Like, you calmly predict 8-4 in the season before the season starts, but when it gets here, everything changes with your emotions on it. And that's one of the things that makes football fun, just the roller coaster of emotion that it takes you through week to week, and not even during the game, but throughout the season, all the things that can happen. Speaking of roller coasters, Andrew Ellis, who's been with us for a couple years now, does a great job at HawgSports. Top 10 Arkansas football wins this decade. I thought this was a cool story. He lays out some honorable mentions. I'm not going to get to those. So do you agree with these or you disagree? 31-7 over Texas in 2014. I'm not going to go through all these. You guys can read this story if you want to. It's at HawgSports, HawgSports.com. You can read this. But the number one, what do you say is the number one win for Arkansas football in the past 10 years? What do you think it is? I'll give you the top 3. 2021, Arkansas 20, Texas A&M 10. Stopped a big losing streak against Texas A&M. Kind of springboarded the Hogs as far as conference play begins. 2015, Hunter Henry Heave. Some people call it the Hunter Heave. Some people call it the Henry Heave. Some people call it the Hunter Henry Heave. We're going Hunter Henry Heave. We'll just combine it all. Arkansas 53, Ole Miss 52 in overtime. Great game. And 2021, Arkansas, Texas. Arkansas 40, Texas 21. That, to me, is the greatest home environment in Arkansas football history. And a big reason for that is it was the first game where, the north end zone was completely full. Because, you go back to 2020, you had the 16,000 fan limit. And before that, it was the Chad Morris era, and nobody was just filling up the stadium. I can remember the last game against Western Kentucky. Was it 40,000, 44,000 in there? So that was the best environment I think I've ever seen for an Arkansas football game, mainly because of the volume, the size of the crowd. By the way, size of the crowd. So you're adding more seats this year. You've got the Big Red bar and grill, I guess. I don't know what they're calling it exactly, but it's in the north end zone up top. It's going to be shaded, which I think is nice. I think that's one of the problems with the north end zone seating is it's luxury seating, but it's September and the sun's just blasting you in the face. I mean, you're just out there sweating. But that bar area is going to be covered. So I think it's going to be pretty nice up there. But there are more seats. But still, the stadium capacity is listed at 76,000. Okay, before they added the north end zone, it was 72,000. And there was all kinds of alterations during that 72,000. They had the temporary bleachers and all that kind of stuff up there also. But it's always stayed at an even number. And you can't tell me that they added exactly 4,000 seats. You can't tell me that they added 4,000 seats. Arkansas is the only stadium that I know of, at least in the SEC, that just has this rounded off number. This is how many seats. That's not I want to know the capacity. It grinds on my nerves a little bit from an OCD standpoint that I don't know the exact seating capacity at Donald W. Reynolds Razorback Stadium. Like, why can't we get an intern to go around there and spend the summer counting the seats? What's the number? I'll tell you something else that kind of bugs me a little bit. The largest crowd in Arkansas football history, I believe, was against Alabama, and it's like 76. It's over 76,000. Okay, that's back when they would do more estimations. They would include concession stand workers, media. Well, I don't count as a member of the media. I don't scan a ticket when I go in. Players for both teams, officials, everybody else, ushers. They used to count all those people. And it was an estimate. So back when it was a 72,000 seat stadium, the capacity, the largest crowd ever is like 76 plus. But now they only do ticket scanned. So every ticket that gets scanned counts as somebody at the stadium. So you're never going to get over 76,000. So until they further expand the stadium, you're never going to have a record crowd. That Texas game is the largest crowd that's ever been at Arkansas. But that's not how it shows up in the record books. I don't like it. I don't like it. Maybe you're fine with it. It's just the way my brain works. It's frustrating sometimes. It works really good for work, but in personal life, it can be a problem. There's this story from 24/7 Sports, the greatest recruiting bust of all time. There's a couple of Arkansas natives on this list. You know, there's your Tate Martells and your Mike Bellamy's and so on and so forth. But Dorial Green Beckham, another guy that Arkansas was down the road for. Dorial, I believe, he had 87 catches for 1,200 yards, 17 touchdowns, freshman, sophomore year. I think he was drafted second round. Is that a bust? Okay. This was from Reddit, I think a Reddit poll. They got him a bust meter of 2. Mitch Mustaine, I think you can definitely say Mustaine was a bust. You got him at 8. Now, he started 8 games for Arkansas, and they won all of them. But obviously, he was one of the top 10 players in the country, and didn't make it to the NFL, didn't start for USC. All kinds of different things with that. But Mustaine's on this list, and Michael Dyer, who ended up going to Auburn. I don't think it's fair to put Michael Dyer on this list. Now, he didn't get drafted in the NFL. He might have played a game or two in the NFL. I think he was with the Raiders. I don't know if he ever got on the field or not. But this is a guy who was on a national championship team at Auburn and ran for 1,000 yards as a true freshman. The next year he ran for 1,200 yards. I don't know. And, obviously he had issues. Was removed from the team, bounced around, ended up at Louisville, I guess, ironically playing for Bobby Petrino after all that stuff. But I don't know if it's fair to put Michael Dyer on this list. I think you can definitely say Mitch Mustaine probably deserves to be on there. There are some other guys. Darius Winston was a 5-star recruit. He didn't have a great Arkansas career and make it onto the NFL. A lot of people have suggested other players. Gary Beshears. Gary Beshears was a 4-star. I think there's a lot of 4-star quarterbacks that didn't really pan out. But anyway, it's an interesting read. Go back in time and look at some of the biggest bust ever. That's fun, isn't it? Go look at busts. Okay, where do we want to go? I met a buddy of mine in Nashville that I hadn't seen in a few years, former college roommate of mine. He listens to the show all the time, and he listens, he doesn't watch, and he says, sometimes I just pause, and he's like, my radio? Is it? And it's like, oh, no, it's Biddy pause, typical Biddy pause. Sometimes I'm just going through my stuff, so I'm supposed to say, make noises when I'm in between now, so Matt can know that I'm not pausing. I wrote an article about sack leaders. Arkansas put up a school record 42 sacks last year. You look at the other programs that were in the top 5 last year in sacks. None of them were in the bottom 5 in the SEC in pass defense. And Arkansas was the worst pass defense in the country last year. So they were rolling the dice a lot, bringing the house, I guess, but did not have the players on the back end, particularly at safety, to cover some of these wide receivers, because Arkansas also gave up a ton of explosive plays last season, like maybe more than anybody, at least more than anybody in the SEC. So, you lose Drew Sanders, 9.5 sacks. Jordan Dominic transferred out, 7.5 sacks. Miles Slusher had 2. Bumper Pool had 2. Terry Hampton had 2. You basically lose 54.8% of your sacks from a year ago. Now you get Zach Williams back. You get Chris Paul back, who had 4 sacks. Zach had 4.5 sacks. So you've got some guys back. I think they're going to really rely on Landon Jackson. If you think about it, Landon Jackson finished last year at 238 pounds. Coming off the ACL, Sam Pittman says he's about 75% speed. He's about 84% of his weight. He's now at 283 pounds. And started about 50% of the game and had 3 sacks. So you look for those numbers to tick up. This guy's clocking out at 20 miles an hour top end speed also. if you want to know how hard it is to run 20 miles an hour, you can go out. You see this trend a lot, like those things that tell you if you're driving too fast on the road, those little radar deals. It's got the number, and you see people sprinting and running, trying to see what kind of speed. If you want to know how hard it is to get 20 miles an hour, go out and test yourself on one of those things. But I think Landon can have a really big season. You got Trajan Jeffcoat had 6 sacks in 2020 in a shortened 10-game season, was an All-SEC performer. Shad Stewart had a couple sacks last year. Jaden Johnson had a sack and a half. So you've got some guys back. Eric Gregory had 2 sacks. Eric Gregory, I think, is maybe one of the more underappreciated players on this team. And you got John Morgan, too. John Morgan had 3 sacks last year, 14.5 career sacks. He had 5.5 sacks in 2021. You got Anthony Booker and Kiwi Rose. I don't know that Arkansas has I don't know as much about Anthony Booker or Kiwi Rose. These guys could be super explosive off the ball. But I don't know if Arkansas has a guy on the interior that's just like, he gets across the line so fast. You remember Malcolm Shepard? Malcolm Shepard got, as far as any defensive tackle in Arkansas history, he got off the line faster than anybody I can ever remember. From the time that he got there, before him, since I've been watching Arkansas football, I don't know if Arkansas has a guy that's just that fast off the line of scrimmage that's going to get in the backfield from the interior. Now, Armon Watts got in the backfield a pretty good bit, and he wasn't just like super quick twitch kind of guy. We saw some guys have some success in the spring, but it could be Arkansas has issues at offensive tackle. How's that going to work out? I'm not going to go into that too much because I talked a little bit about it on the Walk and Talk. If you didn't watch the Walk and Talk, then you can go back and watch that from SEC Media Days. I go through Radio Row and everything and kind of give you a peek behind the scenes. Again, I thought they did a great job at SEC Media Days organizing that. Kudos to the Grand Hyatt in Nashville. Want to answer a couple questions now? I did a radio show out of Alabama right before this, so I've been talking for a while. Justin Williams says, I can't wait for Arkansas football. We win in 10 this season. All right. NP Rich says, is it just me or is the podcast breaking up? I don't think it is. I haven't seen any other replies on that. If it's breaking up for you, let me know. What's Trey? Always love watching the show. The Walk and Talk and SEC Media Days is great. Got me excited for football season. 6 Saturdays from now. 6 Saturdays will be in Little Rock. 10-2, says Bill Rich. A lot of 10-2. People drinking the Kool-Aid. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it, says Bill Richards. Justin Williams says, I think that kid from Valley View will end up back at Arkansas eventually. Brian Huff, the linebacker. MP Rich says, I'm with Bill, 10-2. Ethan Malone says, make me feel better about our O-line. I mean, you got a couple of veterans returning. They definitely changed. I think they felt like a bigger problem with the offensive line was the coaching staff in the weight room versus the offensive line coach and the personnel. So that's the changes that they've made. And again, we've waited for Sam Pittman. One of the things that was intriguing about Sam Pittman coming in was his background as an offensive line coach. You knew he was going to recruit big-time offensive linemen. They've recruited several. They missed on a couple in this class, but, you look back at Andrew Chamblee and Marion Harris, Patrick Kudus, Luke Brown. Those are all big-time 4-star recruits. Getting Joshua Braun was a former very highly regarded player who started 7 games at Florida before last year. So we've been waiting for Sam Pittman's guys to start emerging. Takias Crawford, also part of this team. We've been waiting for those guys to, it's just that he's had more returning starters every single year, multi-year starters, like 4 each time. So that's been kind of the reason we haven't seen those guys. But this is what we've been waiting for. It's always scary. It's all the unknown. Anytime you have like a new quarterback or something, I don't care how highly regarded he is, you never know how good he's going to be. And the same with every single position. Maybe it's more amplified at quarterback, but I mean, I'm right there with you. I'm anxious to see is this group going to hold up? Are they going to be able to protect? They're going to be able to open holes. LSU ain't winning the SEC. LOL, not happening. I mean, Arkansas will beat LSU in the opener. I mean, it's possible. But here's the thing, Justin. I see these kind of, comments all the time. Like, they come out with the top 25 and there's, 10 teams on the list that just aren't losing. Everybody, every week, picks those 10 teams to win, but every single one of them are going to drop off. Every single one of them are going to lose, except for maybe one. throughout the season. A lot of times, you get to the championship game and everybody has a loss. The ball doesn't bounce straight up and down, as Houston Nutt used to say. I love that quote. It's true. And teams lose. That's the reason they play the games. But people always act like it's insane to think that any of these teams can lose, and they all do. They all do at some point. So you never know. LSU won the Western Division last year. They lost the championship game by, 20 points? 2019, they won the national championship with one of the greatest offense of all time, maybe the second best offense of all time. But just because people predict something in an SEC media poll that is always wrong, it doesn't mean it's just going to play out that way. It doesn't mean that Georgia and Alabama are just going to win. They very well could. Obviously, it's Georgia and Alabama, but just because people predicted it doesn't, and the majority of people think that way, doesn't mean how it's going to play out. And we see stuff like that. There are upsets all the time. All the time. Timothy David Long says, "What's up, Trey? Always love watching the show, the Walk and Talk and SEC Media Days. Grab me, so I think I've read that. 10-2. A lot of 10-2. Why does this thing bounce like this? It goes backwards." Justin Williams also says Arkansas will beat LSU. I think that's where I left off. John Smith says, "Trey, if the dynamic between Petrino and Jimbo are not good, how much will it affect the win total?" I think absolutely it could affect it. Now, here's the thing. Too many people talking about this toxic relationship between Jimbo Fisher and Bobby Petrino before it's even happened. Last year it was Brian Kelly with a fake Southern accent, terrible dance moves with recruits, cringy. It was going to be a disaster, right? Now, I didn't feel that way because I know Brian Kelly's history, but everybody was predicting Brian Kelly and LSU are going to be a terrible fit, and they won 10 games last year. Could have very well won 11 and went to the SEC championship game. So I'm kind of one of the people that too many people are talking like this is a marriage that isn't going to work out. Now, having said that, I think I picked LSU to finish fifth in the SEC West. Texas A&M to finish fifth in the SEC West. I also made one of my crazy wild predictions, just an off-the-wall prediction, is that, Texas A&M goes 1-4 in a stretch in the middle of the season and ends up firing Jimbo Fisher on his way back from Oxford, hands the reins over to Bobby Petrino as the interim head coach for 3 games. They go 3-0. They beat LSU in Baton Rouge to finish things off, and he ends up getting the head coaching job, or is the fan favorite for that job. And I said before, he may have hired his replacement, but I mean, too many people are talking like this is a marriage made in hell, and I don't know. I guess it's obvious that I tend to go against the masses sometimes. That's just how I think because I obviously picked Tennessee and LSU. And I'm probably going to be wrong on that. I mean, I admit that. That's, I look at Georgia and I say 3 national championships. Usually a team from the SEC is going to win the national championship. I think 13 of the last 17 have been SEC teams, maybe 4 in a row, something like that. I don't know. Winning 3 national championships, 2 is extremely difficult. 3. David Long says, I say the Hogs finish second or third best. Justin Williams says Hogs will finish first or second in the SEC. Everyone sleep. We have the best QB and RB in the SEC. KJ will be unstoppable this season, loaded up with the secondary. We're going to be busting heads. So I would just ask you, Justin, it's great to have the best quarterback and running back. Do they have the best offensive line? Do they have the best defensive line? Justin Williams says, we win in more than 8 games. We will not be 1-3 in that stretch. Come on, bro. Justin is convinced Arkansas is going to what? Win the national championship? Win the West? Win the SEC? It's a very tough stretch. And I'll say this, Justin. If Arkansas does better than 1-3 in that stretch of 4 games, if they say go 2-2, then they're a 10-win team. They have the ability to win 10 games if they can go 2-2 in that stretch. But I might have to save this, Justin. I'll screenshot real quick. All right, I got it. I got the receipt, Justin. I hope you're right, dude. Trust me. I hope you're right. It's definitely a lot more pleasant, but I'm just trying to look at it objectively. John says, Trey, do you know what kind of offense KJ ran in high school? I don't really remember, but I assume he probably did some RPO stuff. I remember him running the ball a lot. I can remember going back, looking at his tape back 4 years ago. It's been a while. He threw for 3,100 yards or so. Well, I remember thinking what a long strider he is, yada yada, but I can't remember exact offense specifically. I mean, I assume it was a spread offense with an RPO game. Justin Hoofman says, how difficult is it for an OC, in your opinion, to manage a running back group as deep as Arkansas has? I don't think it's difficult at all. I think it's a good problem to have. I think that there's one thing that coaches always say, and I can remember it back, when there was McFadden and Peyton Hillis and Felix Jones and Michael Smith, and I remember coaches saying, we got to find a way to get Michael Smith the ball. No, you don't. You don't have to find a way. You just do it. If you want to get the ball to somebody, you get the ball to them. It's one of the worst phrases that I've heard from coaches, and they say it all the time. We got to find a way to get him the ball more. No, you just do it. They used to say it about Traylon Burks when he was a freshman. It drove me insane with some of the games you'd come out and Traylon Burks had touched the ball like 4 times. I'm not going back there. I don't want my blood pressure to start boiling again. But you get the ball to a guy if you want to get the ball to him. You don't have to try. You just do it because that's the way you win games. So to me, I don't think it's difficult, not in this day and age, because if somebody's unhappy, then they'll leave and you just go get somebody just as good. And if they're better than somebody that you can go get, then you're giving them the ball anyway. And it's a position where players get banged up. You might have Rocket Sanders rolling, and then you had him get banged up in the bowl game, and then you had the other 2 guys step up. So people I always say you need 3 very reliable backs, but really you need more than that. And you really just 2 backs. You go with 2 backs, and the third back comes in, dramatically less, in my opinion, than your top 2 guys. But eventually, one of those guys is going to, get a hamstring or, something like that's going to happen. Something's going to, cause them to get banged up, and you bring another guy in. Bill Rich says 10-2 in football this season. That's my story. Why is it bouncing like this? That's annoying. Like it bounces all the way to the top, and I got to find where I picked up. Too many changes lately with Facebook and Twitter. I'm trying to keep up. All right, where do we go? I'm going to go backwards, and then we'll go in reverse order. John Smith says, Trey, Jimmy Smith, in my opinion, is a fantastic recruiter. Any idea if he wants to move up the ladder at some point as an OC or head coach? Wasn't he a former high school coach? Yes, he was. I assume that one day he would probably like to be a coordinator and a head coach eventually. Trey, who are you repping on the shirt today? I've got Dominga. It's a New Belgium. We went to the New Belgium Brewery. We're in Fort Collins. I got a lot of beer shirts. I was kind of disappointed in my T-shirt game lately, and so I'm like, I had to pull back from it a little bit. It's like, all right, I can't just start buying T-shirts from everywhere I went. But I went to Odell in New Belgium. I loaded up on some T-shirts, so you probably see some more beer T-shirts. But this is a sour, and it's not a sour, or it's a sour, but they add something else to it to kind of pull it back a notch. But yeah, it's one of their beers. My brother-in-law's a brewer up there, and his wife actually works in the lab at New Belgium. Trey, how good is Snacks Johnson when you've seen him? I've heard things, but I think he had 12 tackles last year, which strikes me as very low even for a corner. Is that right? I'm just typing, Matt. I haven't gone away. Your radio's not messed up. Let's see. So played and started in 12 games. Totaled 16 tackles, 1.5 sacks. So 12 games, 16 tackles. No, it's not a lot of tackles. Now, started 12 games for a pass defense that was number 2 in the Big 12 last year. So that's notable. But no, not a lot of tackles. He's actually a pretty solid tackler. In fact, from what I saw from him in the spring, to me, he's a good enough tackler that they should, in my opinion, really consider looking at him at safety. These spots in the secondary are almost all interchangeable now. We saw him work some at nickel. I don't remember ever seeing him work at safety in the spring. But to me, when you talk about Jaheim Singletary coming in, and you got Nudie McLaughlin back, and Ladarius Bishop coming back from injury. Obviously, you lost Quincy McAdoo, but you brought in some other guys, Keon Stewart, am I remembering that name correctly, from TCU. Jalen Braxton, also a really talented freshman corner. You got to move guys around to get your best 5 DBs on the field. And to me, Al-Fahim Walcott, I think, is a good fit for the nickel, and I like Lorando Johnson potentially at safety. Potentially. But 16 tackles, no, that didn't jump out, does it? And we bounced again. Okay. Dustin Hoopin says, I'm excited to see what these new defensive coaches bring to the team. I think Arkansas made significant upgrades there. I like what I've seen out of them. I'm right there with you. Justin Williams says KJ is going to have a Cam Newton type of season this year, and our defense will be solid. It's not a game on the schedule. We can't win this season with our offense. Landon Jackson going to be a force this season. Pooh Paul going to be great, along with the upgrade in the secondary. Snacks and the 5-star from UGA this season is going to be a special year for the Hog fans. I hope you're right. Cam Newton stats. See what Cam Newton did in college. So Cam Newton in 2010 ran 264 times for 1,473 yards and 20 touchdowns. At the time, he was the only guy, I think, to do the 2020 next to Tim Tebow. So is KJ Jefferson going to more than double his rushing total next year? I mean, Cam Newton's one of the greatest college quarterbacks of all time. KJ's great. Love KJ. Is he going to run for almost 1,500 yards? I mean, is that what's happening? I could see him throwing for over 2,800 yards, 2,854 yards, a 182 efficiency rating that would shatter the all-time school record at Arkansas, 30 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. So 182 efficiency rating, 2,854 yards, 1,473 yards, 20 touchdowns, so 50 touchdowns. That'd be a hell of a year. I'd love to watch it. I'd love to be there watching KJ do that, and I hope you're right, Justin. I just think maybe a little bit optimistic there. Dustin Hoopin says, how difficult is it for an OC, in your opinion, to manage a group of running backs as deep as Arkansas has? We already read that one. That means we wrapped up. I want to thank everybody for joining me. I'm sorry it's been a couple of weeks since we've done the studio show, just traveling and, Nashville, Fort Collins and stuff. But when we get to the season, it'll be, 2 times a week, Monday and Thursday, and the walk and talk on Saturday. So we'll be back busy again coming up. I want to thank Danny West, and again, happy birthday to Danny and his daughter. Thank him for coming on, and I appreciate all you guys for your questions. Again, HawgSports is 50% off if you haven't done so already. And once again, leave us that 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Subscribe to the YouTube page. Follow us on Facebook, and we certainly appreciate all that. And again, guys, it's about to come. We are right around the corner. Looks like August 4th, I would guess. They haven't released the official date. I assume they report on August 3rd, which is a Thursday, August 4th, which is a Friday. That falls in line with the 25 practices and 29 days leading up to the first game, which is September 2nd in Little Rock. Again, Brett Saracen has Arkansas 34.5 point favorites. Download the Bet Saracen app, or you can go to, betsaracen.com for all that. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining me. This has been Trey Biddy with HawgSports.com. Catch you next time.